It's an honour to have the opportunity to give you an overview of the history of the organisation since its foundation 60 years ago. Um, for some here today, this organisation will be Galway Social Service Council. For others, it will be Galway Voluntary Social Services. For most people now, it is COPE Galway. Similarly, some of you will associate the organisation with its work supporting older people in our community, others with responding to domestic abuse, and others with tackling homelessness in Galway. And for many, you will associate the organisation with people who have benefited from its work, people who have volunteered their time, and people who have worked within the organisation. So over the next 15 minutes, I hope to do justice to the work of Liam Alex Heffron, who compiled the history of the organisation in a publication, a summary version of which will be available at the end of today's event. I think Liam Alex is here with us today. Liam Alex just here on my left. Liam Alex is a local historian whom we engage to research and write this history. As we reflect on this history, it is important to remember that it represents the legacy of many people. Some here today, some unable to be with us, but especially those who are no longer with us, some of whom had the vision to establish the organisation in 1965 to make a difference. Others, through their contribution as volunteers, staff, or directors, helped make that difference happen. This history is also the legacy of the community of Galway, most importantly, of people who were supported through the work of the organisation and who continue to support it. Something to be mindful is that some of the language, terms that served their use in previous years, are now unhelpful in ensuring that all people are treated with respect and humanity that they deserve. However, so you get a true sense of the different periods of the organisation's history, you will hear some of this language over the next few minutes. The history of the organisation can broadly be considered in three periods, beginning with the years 1965 to 1977. This was the founding period, when the organisation took on the role of coordinating traditional social services in Galway, working in partnership with local voluntary groups and religious orders. Galway Social Services, as the organisation was first known, emerged from a campaign led by Sister Mary Campion, a Sister of Charity nun and social worker. One of the earliest milestones was the opening of Galway Social Service Centre on Francis Street in 1966, a premises donated for use by the Sisters of Mercy. From there, local volunteers working alongside charitable religious groups and local voluntary organisations delivered practical services including home visits, hot meals, and laundry support to people in need. Under the patronage of Bishop Michael J. Brown, Galway Social Service Council brought together diverse groups, including the St. Vincent de Paul, who are represented here today, local trade unions, the Legion of Mary, and Little Sisters of the Assumption, creating a network of services that benefited hundreds of people through the late 1960s and early 1970s. By the 1970s, however, Galway's social challenges were becoming more complex. Issues such as homelessness, family breakdown, and social exclusion were emerging more strongly as Galway became a more modern and growing city. It became clear that the organisation's existing structures, primarily as a coordinating body, was limiting in its ability to respond effectively. A review, along with recommendations from the Western Health Board, suggested that the organisation needed to reinvent itself to meet these challenges. Expanded services were called for, including enhanced Meals on Wheels programme and improved supports for socially isolated people and victims of domestic abuse. The conclusion was that the organisation needed to evolve from a coordinating body into a more dynamic and responsive service provider, capable of directly addressing emerging social challenges. I want to just highlight a few notable points and things that occurred during this period. In 1968, Mary Canavan of Tuam became the first paid social worker in the organisation. In 1975, a survey conducted of older people in Galway found many were struggling. Half had only 3 or 4 hot meals a week and lived on less than £10 a week, while the third identified proper housing as their most urgent needs. In 1976, a report highlighted key challenges. Family problems related to an alcoholic spouse necessitating accommodation for battered wives, homelessness among men, and a need for expanded Meals on Wheels and home help services. The second period, from 1978 to 1993, was one of major transformation. During this time, the organisation restructured itself to become both a coordinating body for over 40 voluntary organisations and a direct provider of new services. The organisation expanded its operation to include housing assistance, hostels for battered wives, shelters for the homeless, and comprehensive support to the poor and elderly. These services filled critical gaps at a time when many vulnerable people had few, if any, supports available. Key supporters in enabling this work included the Western Health Board and Galway Corporation. However, by the early 1990s, the organisation was again facing serious challenges. Financial pressures were increasing, there were staffing challenges, and the organisation's structure was struggling to keep pace with evolving need of the community. This led to an existential crisis with a critical review in 1993 by Dr. Kieran McKeown, which examined the organisation's management, delivery, and quality of services. The review raised fundamental questions about the organisation's dual role and long-term viability. Should it narrow its focus to elderly care or reinvent itself as an independent, all-encompassing advocate and service provider for Galway? What emerged was a plan to transfer several services, including hostels, resource centres, to other agencies with a view to pivoting the organisation towards a leaner focus on services for older people. Some notable developments in this period included the opening of Waterside House in June 1981. Wood Key Districts and Residents Association supported the planning application, and as part of the discussion with local residents, it was agreed that the area in the immediate vicinity of the hostel will be patrolled at night by male volunteers in liaison with Gardaí, and this was for an initial 6-month period. In 1982, the Son Estates Centre for Older People opened in Walter Mackin Place in Merview. The following year saw the establishment of Fairgreen Hostel for Homeless Men in a small prefabricated building in the corner of the then Fairgreen car park off of Eyre Square. This was designed to accommodate 16 men and was deemed a temporary shelter until a suitable site for a permanent structure was acquired. This was initially operated jointly with the Simon community. In 1984, experienced social worker Paula Naughton joined the organisation as administrator, leveraging her background with Sister Stanilas Kennedy and Bishop Bertrand Kilkenny, pioneers in the social service movement. And I'm pleased to say that Paula is here with us today. In 1986, Westside House Hostel for Homeless Women and Unmarried Mothers opened, initially operating on a night shelter basis for women with children who were forced from home as a result of domestic violence or the threat of it, while these women were able to access Waterside House during the daytime. And finally, in 1990, Christmas Day Swim took place for the first time in support of Waterside House, a tradition that continues to this day. And this brings me to the most recent period from 1994 to the present day. During the early part of this period, the organisation navigated critical decisions about its role, evolving from a primarily volunteer-based coordinating entity under the patronage of the Galway Diocese and less responsive to emerging needs into an independent, professional body dedicated to addressing homelessness, domestic abuse, and the support of healthy independent ageing through the direct provision of effective services. In the early years following the McKeown report, the organisation stood at a crossroads in deciding whether it would downsize to a non-profit entity primarily focused on delivering services for elderly through volunteers, or become a direct provider of services to meet gaps in addressing social needs in Galway. In the end, fate decreed that the decision was made for them. None of the proposed transfers of services actually occurred, since none of the agencies identified to take over these services were in a position to do so. Galway Social Service Council chose to again reinvent itself, this time as a fundamentally restructured organisation under the necessary organisational alignment and operational changes as identified and envisaged through the McKeown report. This saw a legal restructuring in 1996 to become Galway Voluntary Social Services Limited, followed by a comprehensive rebranding in 2000 as COPE Crisis Housing Caring Support Limited. I suppose fittingly, the guest of honour on the occasion of COPE Crisis Housing Caring Support and that change was Mick Lally, and we're in the Mick Lally Theatre today for this event. And I suppose what then followed was the organisation became commonly known as COPE, but a further iteration since 2008 saw the name changed to COPE Galway. During this period in 1997, Jackie Horn was appointed director, bringing both social science and business expertise to the organisation. Jackie served in the role for 24 years until 2021, when our current CEO, Michael Smith, was recruited. Jackie's commitment and experience were not lost to us as she moved to the head of Senior Support Services for a further 4 years until last year. And again, Jackie is with us here today. Throughout this time, the organisation steadily expanded and its services, and in terms of its services and impact. Westside House, in addition to accommodating families and children in 1996, also started to accommodate unaccompanied minors and extended to being a 24-hour, 7-day service. In 2005, however, it ceased to operate as a hostel. Family Support Services, first established as an outreach service to Westside House in 1999, with a focus on prevention and tenancy support. By 2005, this became the mainstay of the response to family homelessness in Galway. It continues as that today, along with Corrib Haven Family Hub, which opened in 2019 in response to the crisis of family homelessness that we are now living through. The response to single-person homelessness also necessitated new thinking and approaches. In addition to Fairgreen Hostel, which opened as a new 26-bed hostel in 1997, and Osterley Lodge, a 12-bed hostel for single homeless women, which opened in 2002, the past 10 years have seen growth in community-based housing in the form of shared housing units for single people and couples as part of response to this growing need. The Day Centre for Homeless, including a street outreach and regional outreach service, and the seasonal cold weather response, a seasonal winter initiative operating since 2006, are now also key parts of this response, focused on addressing the increased prevalence of people sleeping rough. COPE Galway's domestic abuse services also grew significantly since 1994. A dedicated childcare unit opened in Waterside House Refuge in 1995, and this has since developed into the Solace Oak service, supporting children and young people affected by domestic abuse. In 1999, the Domestic Abuse Outreach Service was established, and today supports hundreds of women each year with regular outreach clinics, including in the county towns around Galway. One of the most significant developments came in 2020 with the opening of Moella House, the new home of COPE Galway's domestic abuse services. With funding support from Galway City Council and the Department of Housing, and an intensive fundraising campaign headed by the COPE Galway board, Moella House opened its doors in May 2020 on the site of the former Mercy Order Convent in Foster Street. This has allowed COPE Galway to further develop and expand the offering available to women experiencing domestic abuse and their children. Senior support services have similarly grown and expanded over the past 3 decades. Meals on Wheels moved from Francis Street to Ballyban in 2005, evolving into what is now Meals for Health, a social enterprise with a widened scope and capacity. In parallel with this, community supports for older people have continued to grow, building on the Solace Day Centre, which opened in 1982 and continues to operate up to today and beyond. Today, our senior support team provide a range of one-to-one supports and services for older people in the community, with bases in a number of Galway City Council housing schemes for elderly in the city. The development and continuing expansion of lunch clubs and the opening of the bungalow in Merview in cooperation with Merview Parish in 2021 as a community hub for older people further reflects how embedded we are in the community of Galway. To support this growth, the organisation's governance and support functions have also developed to allow us to continue quality services. At the same time, our development and fundraising capacity has grown, allowing us to innovate and respond to new and increasing needs. Threaded through the entire history of the organisation is volunteering. In the earliest years between 1965 and 1977, the organisation relied almost entirely on volunteers in local organisations to carry out its missions. The records don't tell us how many volunteers were involved at any one time during those early years, but what is clear is that a diversity of people of all ages and backgrounds were giving their time and skills to help others. And while roles may have changed, it is perhaps not that different to the motivation and contribution of the 250 volunteers we have today. Alongside this, the organisation has developed a highly skilled and committed professional staff. Something that began as early as 1968 with the appointment of Mary Canavan as the first paid social worker. For 60 years, volunteers and staff together have worked to support the people of Galway and continue to do so today. In conclusion, I want to introduce a short video. It is difficult to capture 60 years of history in a short presentation. The next few slides attempt to give some more context and information about the development of COPE Galway through the decades. So the work of COPE Galway is not just about celebrating the past, it's about the present, some of which I've briefly touched on, and our hopes for the future. To explore this, we're going to hear from the